Hello, Women of the Channel Leadership Network. I'm Jackie Rives, your community leader, and welcome to another Woman of the Week. This week, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Thana Balasingham, founder of Lean In Network Singapore and the Elevate Group. Was also the former vice president of VMware for Asia Pacific Japan. And she is the opening keynote at our upcoming Women of the Channel Asia in Singapore. Hi, I'm so excited to get to know you, and thank you for joining me today.
Likewise. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're going to dive into some icebreakers so we can get to know you a little bit. So let's start off with, where do you live and where did you grow up, if that's different?
Yes, I currentently live in Singapore. And while I was born here, I was actually raised in Malaysia in a very small town just across the border called Johor Bahru.
I cannot wait to come visit you in Singapore for the event. I'm in awe of the beauty of Singapore.
Well,
So, if you don't mind sharing, what is a fun fact or perhaps a little known fact about you?
in 2011, I went into a boxing ring and did what is called the white collar boxing, which is for professionals that have never done boxing. And I really did it to test my stamina and strength because in school, I was not one of the strongest girls. I couldn't really run long distance and I couldn't do a lot of sports. I had like heart issues and all of that. So I really wanted to challenge myself. And this is back when I was at EMC. And so I had to warn my boss because I'd start showing up in the office with some black and blue bruises. But yeah, I did it, 3 rounds, 2 minutes each. And I think my biggest lesson in that is that it's not just about physical strength, it's actually your mental strength. And I learned that I was a very calm boxer. Like people would hit me and I wouldn't react. And I needed to learn how to be more aggressive, but not to the extent that I would be all over the place.
Wow. I think that is so admirable and brave, really, to try something like that. I'm so impressed right now. Thank you for sharing that with us. So, we were talking about, questions and what we would talk about during this interview. And I love that we kind of talked about this topic of, why smart, capable women such as ourselves still get in our own way, and how can we stop that?
Yeah, this is interesting for me because it's what I've observed working with women in the last 9 years with Lean in Singapore. And also, I had a team of hundreds at VMware. So I think that the first thing is that we've been taught to do that. We've been taught to get into our own way. At least for me, from a young age, I've been handed this playbook that tells me not to take up too much space, not to make others uncomfortable, and not look like we're trying too hard. And so I think those rules quietly expire by the time we reach leadership, and then no one gives us a new rule book. Now, at the same time, I do believe that women also hide behind excuses. I think we tell
Mm.
ourselves, whatever version of this, we're too busy to wake up early for that event. These are all true stories. We can't justify investing in a course. Someday, someone will notice me and prioritize my growth. I think smart, capable women sabotage themselves by putting everyone and everything else first. So, how do we stop it? I think it's radical ownership. We have to treat our visibility, networks, and self investment as non negotiable. I think the women who rise aren't the ones who wait for that perfect timing, they create it for themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And much of that resonated with me personally. So I love that we're talking about this. One word that I do think comes up a lot is politics. And it is very scary for so many women. Why does this word so scary for us? And what's the cost of sitting out?
Yeah, I love the topic of workplace politics. I think it's because politics has been branded as dirty. Women, especially, are told that merit alone will carry us forward, and that being good at our jobs is enough capability. And no question, it isn't, right? There's your performance currency and there's your relationship currency in the workplace. And politics is simply how power moves in an organization. The way I describe it is it's the unwritten rules of how to get what done through whom. And so opting out doesn't make you principled, it just makes you invisible. And I learned this the hard way. And so that's the cost of sitting it out. You get left out of rooms where decisions are made. You don't get sponsored. You don't get promoted on potential like your male peers. And so we need to reclaim politics as a leadership skill versus a dirty word so that we can navigate influence with integrity and not manipulation.
These are great, great insights. When you change the definition of something from being the assumption of what it means and flip that narrative, it becomes very clear on the critical aspects of making sure that we are making those moves that we should be making for our own career.
Yeah.
So, as women, of course, or, even as people, there are moments in our life where career breaks happen. So, what really happens when you take a career break, and how do you come back stronger and not smaller?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most important discussions right now. So I'm so glad you asked the question because career breaks are becoming more of a norm, but it's still treated as if you don't have a linear career, that there's something wrong with you. So I think career breaks exposes the brutal truth that, workplaces rarely know what to do with you when you don't fit that linear narrative. And I believe this is the opportunity to rewrite your story. The women who come back are always stronger. They are the ones who don't apologize for the gap, but position it as a growth. For example, like I say to women, start your interviews by addressing that. Don't wait for them to ask you the question. So go into offense to avoid defense. And you could say something like, here's how that season sharpened my perspective, my priorities, my value, and say, like, I chose to take that break. Right? Not I had to. So, and I think we all seem to forget, like, as if all the skills and gifts that we have magically disappeared just because we went on a career break, right? I mean, this is the whole out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, right? So they are all still there. And I think women need to be reminded that they are still there because we take this huge confidence dip. And so you return not as who you are, but I believe you can return as someone more strategic, more grounded, and often more fearless. I don't give now, like,
Mm,
and I think that confidence, like, hey, I'm gonna do this with or without you. I call it with or without you energy. And how you frame the break is what turns the gap into an advantage.
this is great stuff. I completely agree with you. I did take a career gap because I wanted and chose to be around for my girls when they were younger. So I did more of a hobby of starting a business doing photography for a while. This was more than a decade ago. So I know exactly, as I'm listening to you, I'm like, I remember feeling that way, like, okay, it's time to go back. Now what? So the only thing I would add to what you said is even when you're in these breaks, you're in these breaks for a reason, and you're probably doing things that are leveraging those skills that you think, like you said, disappeared, but also probably gaining some new skills that would be transferable. You just have to think about it differently. And like you said, come back with tons more confidence and owning the choice that you made in that moment. Such great advice. All right, we have time for one more. So I would love to hit, what's a career quake and how do you rebuild when the professional ground beneath you collapses?
Yeah, I came up with this word earlier this year, and it's
Hmm.
my own experience of leaving VMware. And that happened at the end of December 2023. And I found myself, I had the next job lined up. I was, getting calls, and that job didn't materialize. And I found myself asking a few questions, and then I just went into filling up my calendar. Like doing. And I think women are so good at doing. And a few months later, I had a collapse. And so a career quake is that moment when everything you built, your title, your identity, a lot of my identity was tied to my title at work, my network, the security of a paycheck, all of that crumbles. So it can come from a redundancy, a layoff, a divorce, burnout, even the realization that the life you built no longer fits who you are. For me, I went up the mountain and then I was like, oh, I didn't expect this was the view. I thought was going to be different. So, and I loved my job. I loved the people. I had great bosses. So I didn't have any of those negative experiences. And so I think rebuilding for me starts with getting brutally honest.
Mm.
Who am I without the business card? What do I want my next chapter to look like? And then you experiment. I spent all of last year experimenting. You try, you fail, you learn. You surround yourself with people who see you beyond your last job title. I let you into a little secret. Not a lot of people call you after you leave your job. um,
Mm.
right? Then you really
Mm-hmm.
kind of think about, oh, actually, who do I want to actually remain friends with? So a career quick feels like an ending, but it's often the birthplace of the most authentic, powerful version of your career. And career isn't necessarily what we think the traditional term is today. So I think all of that is possible if you're willing to do the work of reinvention. And so I came up with this word because I couldn't find a word out there. And so I've been writing about it, and it's going to be my first book. So you're hearing it.
Oh,
Yeah.
and that just wrapped us up beautifully. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me. I am so thrilled that we are celebrating you as our Woman of the Week, and I cannot wait to see you in person in just a few weeks, really.
Yeah. I'll see you soon.
All right. Well, community members, please comment, continue the conversation. It was never meant to be here. It gave us a lot to think about. So let's get talking in the Women of the Channel Leadership Network. So until next time, have an amazing week.